So welcome to our Media Landscapes webinar. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Matt Lee, and he's going to do a brief introduction, and then we will get to our main event, Mac Freeman.
Great, thanks, Linda, and hello. Welcome to the second installment of our Media Landscapes campaign. Thanks so much for joining us today. And so excited to have John Mac Freeman to join us to talk about deepfakes and the misinformation landscape. Before we get to Mac, though, I'm pleased to say just a couple words of introduction about the campaign as a whole. I want to start by thanking our funding partners in this endeavor. A number of organizations across Minnesota have come together to contribute both money and ideas to help to make this campaign a reality. So thanks to Minitex, as well as PALS and the Minnesota Multi-Type Systems and the Regional Public Library Systems as well. The campaign has grown out of kind of shared concern that I think a lot of us have been feeling over the last number of years about our media landscape and growing challenges within that media landscape and kind of the division that is increasingly wrought within that landscape. A desire to come together as a profession and a group of colleagues to discuss different aspects of the media landscape, forces within that landscape that influence how we as information consumers and guides kind of navigate the landscape. So that kind of investigation of the landscape is a part of the goal for this ongoing year-long campaign. Also want to really consider intentionally how we as library professionals consume information and reflect on information, and then share our own experiences and consider practical approaches that we have or that we might take in engaging our students and our patrons and our researchers in thinking about misinformation and media. So those are the kind of broad overarching goals of this ongoing campaign. They are big goals and multifaceted. So the way that we are thinking of tackling those goals is bringing in multiple perspectives and speakers to talk on different aspects and different approaches to topics related to these goals. Last month, we kicked off the series with Renee Hobbs from the University of Rhode Island to talk about propaganda in media and society, even in libraries. We are looking forward after today's presentation in May to our next speaker, Lisa Hines from the University of Minnesota, to talk about critical thinking and information evaluation from a civic engagement perspective. As well as our next speaker, Michael Spikes from Northwestern University and formerly the Center for News Literacy, to talk about news literacy as well. You can learn more about these speakers, upcoming, current, past, on our website, levelupmn.org. Let me drop the direct link in the chat. This link will go to our statewide collaborative professional development, library professional development website, where you can learn more. In addition, we are also looking to highlight expertise from within the Minnesota library community. We know that there are folks have experiences, folks have expertise and working with their communities and talking to their communities about information literacy and challenges of media navigation, and we want to really highlight those voices. So if you are in Minnesota and you have an idea for perhaps a presentation or an idea for, sorry, let me get that link out to the right people, to everybody there. If you have an idea for a presentation, if you have an experience that you would be willing to share, boy, we would love if you would submit a proposal. Sometimes things that seem commonplace to us are revelatory to other people when shared. So please do consider submitting a proposal. Without further ado, let me move to introducing today's speaker, Mac Freeman. We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Mac comes to us as a manager for Gwinnett Public Library in Georgia. So let me get your slide up here. In Georgia, just northeast of Atlanta. A colleague saw you speak, Mac, at ALA Midwinter and was so excited, came back with just so many ideas. And so I'm very excited to hear presentation today. And looking over some of your biography, I was also very appreciative of the contributions that I see that you have made in a number of different ways through service in both state and national library associations. So thank you for that service. And then I was poking around just a little bit on the Gwinnett County Library website, and I noticed two things in particular. One, I see that your library is nominated for a 2021 IMLS National Medal. So congratulations on that nomination. And I also noticed that your Duluth Library branch is opening in a newly constructed space soon. And I don't know if you know this, but we have a Duluth here in Minnesota, and a great Duluth Public Library here in Minnesota too. So I will stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to you, Mac. Thank you very much again for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you all so much for having me today. I am thrilled to be here. And so I'm going to share my screen. All right. I just want to confirm that everybody can see that.
Looks good.
Fantastic. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Mac Freeman. Like they said, I live just north of Atlanta in Gwinnett County, which is the main suburb of the metro area. I work a lot in intellectual freedom and privacy spaces. But before we jump too deep in today, I want to start out with a video that some of you may have already seen.
That's why. Oh. It's it's a little embarrassing, you know. It reminds me, I was once in Russia, I ran into Gorbachev. He said, you know, Mr. Movie Star, are you nervous? I said, no, Mr. Gorbachev, I'm not nervous, I don't. He goes, well, remember how much a polar bear weighs. I said, polar bear? He said, enough to break the ice. It's the last time I've ever seen Mikhail Gorbachev.
So I really like that video because if you're unfamiliar with deepfakes, this is perhaps one of the more prominent examples from the last few months. This is a part of a selection of videos that were posted to TikTok starting in November of last year through about March. They've received millions of views, but this isn't a true depiction of the sometimes erratic actor Tom Cruise. Instead, this is a production of Belgian visual effects artist Chris Oom. In the opinion of some experts, this is one of the best examples of a deepfake that is widely accessible today. It was created using a combination of Deepface Lab, which is available on GitHub, and Adobe After Effects. And it's got backgrounds and good face swapping and camera racking, and there's just a lot of things that lend itself to its authenticity. And deepfakes are getting more common with each passing day. So a better understanding of them is vital to the current information landscape. So what are we going to cover today? First, we're going to define deepfakes. We're going to talk about the term and the process and where they come from and where it fits in this broader media landscape that we all exist in. Then we're going to look at how deepfakes are being used today, both for good and for bad. Next, we're going to talk about how deepfakes are made. And then we're going to tie it all back to libraries, talking about why we should care as librarians and educators, what can be done about the issues that this media raises. And then I'm going to leave you with some questions that the field needs to grapple with, but I'm, not the end all be all of deepfake knowledge, and there is no right answer. We've got a lot to cover, so we're going to go ahead and jump in. I just want to say that the Q&A feature is open, so please feel free to ask questions whenever you want, and the other co-hosts will relay those to me as we need to. So let's get started. So what are deepfakes? The term is thrown around a lot in the media, so I think it'll be useful if we're all speaking the same language. Deepfakes are media that take the likeness of one person and replace it with someone else's likeness using artificial neural networks. The term is often used interchangeably with phrases like AI-generated media, generative media, and personalized media. It can include any or all of audio, image, video, and speech synthesis to create a realistic artificial result. Deepfakes and cheap fakes, which we'll come to in just a moment, are all forms of synthetic media. Synthetic media is an umbrella term that can refer to any media manipulated by software, regardless of its use, placement, or intent. For instance, the Tom Cruise video we just watched is synthetic media, but so are things like blog posts and recipes generated by the GPT-3 auto-regressive language model, or even some heavily algorithmically tuned Instagram images. So while GPT-3 or Facetune create text or images and not video, they live in the same world of media that has a final product that is created using tools beyond direct human effort. And we're going to go into the technology some, but you don't have to have a huge tech background to understand what we're going to talk about today. So what makes something explicitly a deep fake? Well, deepfakes need to be understood to be on a spectrum of synthetic audiovisual media. On the one hand, you have deepfakes. These are things that are developed using AI, and they include things like virtual performance mapping, voice synthesis, and face swapping. These things generally require a high degree of technical skill. They are pretty expensive to produce, and they may involve AI or advanced technological processing. In the narrowest sense, only the things that are on the left side of this slide technically count as a deep fake. If it's not involving AI in some capacity, it's not a true deep fake. And this is, I stole this from a Data and Society report that was excellent to lay out this graphic and all of the examples. That being said, there is a difference between the technical definition and the common parlance and what people actually use deepfake to mean. In common use, deepfake as a term has also been used to refer to rotoscope face swapping, face altering filters on social media platforms, and deceptive editing or contextualization practices. These typically require a lot less skill to use, and the tools are either free or generally widely available to the consumer market. However, the results are easier to see as synthetic and much less likely to pass muster upon investigation. Because of the lower barrier to entry through both technological expertise and the resources you need to create it, this zone is commonly referred to as cheap fakes. And basically, the further you get into deepfake territory, the harder it is to tell that something is fake, but the more expensive and more time consuming it is to construct. So it's a trade-off between ease and the utility of the result. So let's take a brief look at the history of deepfakes, or as much of a history as it can possibly have. Video swapping, which is kind of the forerunner of deepfake technology, has been around as an academic exercise in computer coding since about 1997. There's a paper by Bregler, Koval, and Slaney that wrote the first video rewrite program. And that was the first time that showed a practical application of faces being swapped in a video. The term deepfake, though, didn't really come around until a Reddit user who started a subreddit of the same name in 2017. Since then, deepfakes began to develop in earnest, developing creator communities across the web in a number of areas. By the end of 2018, one census of these videos placed the number at just under 8,000. Within the next 2 years, that would nearly double to almost 15,000. Interest in deepfakes would continue to be spurred on by a few high-profile incidents, mentions in the news, editorials worrying about their implications and their impact on the media landscape, educational webinars like the one we're doing right now. And then there was a hearing in the US House of Representatives about deepfakes in 2019, coupled with the Department of Defense being told to study the possible implication of deepfakes from an intelligence and homeland security perspective. In 2020, some legislatures began talking about legislation to deal with deepfakes, which we will also go into later. And that included California AB 730, which banned malicious deepfakes more than 60 days before an election. Before we get too far into talking about deepfakes, though, we need to understand that they are not inherently a problem. Synthetic media is made for a lot of different reasons that we will get into. But there are approximately 20 different deepfake communities in the world right now, involving nearly 100,000 users by some reports, interested or involved with deepfake development at some level. Some of these activities are research-oriented, some are business-oriented, others are seeking more antisocial ends. But deepfakes in and of themselves do not present a problem to society. As many of the technologists doing work in this area are quick to point out, deepfakes are a tool with no inherent ethical value. Rather, it is how they've been put to use by and against people that is the issue. Your mileage may vary about how much you think that definition holds water, and you know, I certainly have my opinions, and we will get into that. While this is true on some level, I don't wholly buy this line of reasoning, and I think that deepfakes and synthetic media more broadly are a Pandora's box that society should be incredibly careful with as we develop them and as they become more common. So what does it cost in like pure financial terms to put together a deepfake? It can be hard to track down the growth of something as amorphous as a format of media or a style of putting together video, but there are several things available that can be used as proxies when trying to track the ubiquity of these services. So when you think about deepfakes as a tool, it can be handy also to think of them in terms of cost of production. Much of the software to produce deepfakes is actually open source and freely available. You can go online and download it yourself today. While the developers of these tools and the communities around them admit that there can be a steep learning curve, those with experience in video production and manipulation have a leg up in learning these techniques. Deepfakes of various qualities are certainly not beyond the abilities of a devoted amateur. On top of that, there are companies that will create various styles of deepfakes for a nominal fee. Deepfake videos can be produced for as little as $2.99, and video and voice cloning can be had from some sources for as low as 20 cents per word. These costs are falling all the time, and as the communities get larger and more players enter the field, and as more of this work can be automated without the interference of a human, the prices will only continue to fall. Thus, the overall trend in deepfakes is a better quality product that can actually be produced for ever-shrinking costs. This profit motive has encouraged numerous companies to enter the deepfake space. The corporate space in this area is continuing to grow, and most of these companies did not exist prior to 2017. And the space of companies interested in deepfake videos and audios, as well as synthetic media more broadly, is growing each year as the methodology becomes more sophisticated. And like I was just saying, the barriers to entry become lower. While many of these companies are not focused on ideas in the information landscape, you know, they're more prominently focused on social media and communications applications, the technology they develop may have implications beyond their initial development use. The dozen or so companies that are on your screen right now, these are just a few of the companies that are focusing in the deepfake space and on AI in some capacity. But these are just like people who are directly focused on it 100%. Many of the major internet companies, notably Google and Facebook, are also heavily investing in AI, and due to their positioning are well suited to take on deepfake projects. So now that we have a bit of a handle on what a deepfake is, let's talk about how it's being used. We're actually going to start a little backwards on this because the most common uses of deepfakes that make the news are the most problematic. In an effort to portray this tool more evenly, I will at least attempt to portray some of the positive uses that it is put to these days. First off, and probably the thing you see the most often, is you can do it for the memes. Things like photo filters that can commonly be found on Snapchat are a form of cheap fake photo manipulation that falls into the related realm of social media. This is one of the main areas of current interest in some of the higher profile companies pursuing deepfake technologies. So these are two face swaps of me. That's putting me into the Guardians of the Galaxy and the How to Train Your Dragon series. These face swaps were created using the Reface app on my iPhone. They each took approximately 30 seconds and they cost nothing to me. While they aren't seamless, that isn't the point really of the meme version. The point is to make a realistic facsimile that points people in a certain direction of thinking about something. Something that really took off at the end of last year and the early part of 2021 were programs like Deep Nostalgia that allowed for historical pictures to be animated and to be shown in movement. This can be applied to historical figures or family members and led to a number of heartwarming viral videos. Deepfakes and cheapfakes are not always produced with malicious intent. One of their most prevalent uses, in fact, is to entertain, and that should not be forgotten about as we go into this. Another use for deepfakes, particularly in the area of voice manipulation and encoding, is in audio reconstruction. Project Revoice from the ALS Association is a prime example of a proponent of this. ALS, also known as motor neuron disease, is a progressive neurodegenerative disease that often takes away a person's ability to speak. Through the use of the tools that they promote and are involved with developing, these synthetic media software options allow people to either preserve or remake their voices as their diseases progress and they lose the natural ability to speak. There's a number of options on the market, and they are getting stronger and more adaptive all the time. In much the same way that other AI developments in healthcare may help with diagnostic work, these developments in synthetic media can assist with palliative care and relieving some of the issues caused by degenerative conditions. You can also see a lot. So I have another example that I want to show you now. We're going to jump over here.
Let's get right to it. The Chicago Bulls have won their second three-peat. This is the kind of stuff that ESPN will eventually make a documentary about. They'll call it something like The Last Dance and make it a 10-part series and release it in the year 2020. It's going to be lit. You don't even know what that means yet. While I'm making predictions, jeans will get extra tight. There'll be a thing called a butt fumble, and this clip will be used to promote the documentary in a State Farm commercial. It's just a hunch.
So, as you can see from that clip, the use of deepfakes may start to become more common in advertising. That was an ad for The Last Dance that played on ESPN. And manipulating past footage to create something new has been a long-standing artistic practice, and its use will likely continue in the future. Because of the potential financial rewards, advertisers have been quick to move into this space. One of the more interesting current test cases that I'm aware of is a company called Rosebud AI. This company produces products that allow for virtual models to be generated without the expense of photo shoots or the effort to ensure that multiple ethnicities and body types are represented in a company's marketing efforts. Instead, they can be generated by an AI to meet the needs of the clients and the preferences of the consumer. One of the primary stated goals is to allow for smaller clothing brands to access a wider diversity of models in their marketing materials. They have released data sets that showed tens of thousands of faces of models that have never existed. Rosebud's technology has further developed to be able to place words recorded by someone else in the mouths of synthetic models. Similar uses have been shown for the marketing and corporate training space, allowing companies to record a training by one person and in one language and have it translated into the mouth of and face of a localized avatar to speak to their international audiences. This dramatically can cut down the cost of creating content while simultaneously creating a more personalized experience. So on the one hand, this does promote diversity. On the other hand, it doesn't really require the presence of anybody who is from those communities as part of the conversation or as part of the work or the labor of putting these things out. And so it's very complicated as to whether this creates more problems than it solves or where it sits in our current conversations around these issues. You also, this advertising is not just contained to the private sector. Political parties are starting to get in on the action. On February 7th, 2020, a day ahead of the Legislative Assembly elections in Delhi, in India, two videos from the Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP, the President Manoj Tiwari criticizing the incumbent Delhi government of Arvind Kejriwal went viral on WhatsApp. While one video had Tiwari speak in English, the other was him speaking in the Hindi dialect of Haryani. The deepfakes were created by a company called Ideas Factory, that's ideas with a Z, to overcome the language barrier. In political advertising, this may become more of a trend. The importance in tailoring messages to communities in their native languages is gaining clout across the political spectrum with politicians around the world. Many, if not most, countries feature an electorate that speak a variety of languages and dialects that many politicians may not speak or may be unfamiliar with. By using deepfake technology, particularly the audio-based features, political entities can morph their message to meet the linguistic needs of the target community without having to reshoot video or find on-camera talent who can actually speak the language. It can also allow the same message to go out simultaneously in multiple languages. This sits somewhere on the line of reality, because is a political message real if the content was produced by the person saying it, but not the actual words in a language that they are speaking? Because such technology is not envisioned by most political election advertising laws, this point has not really been adjudicated anywhere in the world. And so it's open to interpretation, and I would assume at some point litigation. Another model that you're seeing talked about by some new companies is harassment prevention and privacy. There's Modules Voice Skins project provides real-time audio translation, and it's targeted towards the gaming community, where often women and players from minority backgrounds can be targeted for harassment over other players. While this is an interesting development, and I'm certainly in favor of minimizing harassment in gaming spaces, it does not solve the problem of asking those being, it kind of interjects the problem of asking those being harassed to solve the harassment rather than cracking down on those doing the harassing in the first place. There's also a company called D-ID, and they have a thing called smart anonymization. And so they are confronting problems of storing secure data under regimes like the European Union's General Data Protection Regime, the GDPR. And basically face prints and like all of pictures and all of that are now sensitive data. And so they have to be protected. And so it translates photos into a format unreadable by computers, but still visible to humans. However, it does not actively work to discourage the accumulation of all of this data about people and all of this surveillance. It just makes it easier and safer for companies to do this surveillance. Now we're going to hit the darker side of deepfakes. While the technology is certainly put to some positive uses, the concerns and interest around deepfakes primarily comes from the issues where it's causing the biggest problems. We're going to explore these now, and I'm not going to really pull my punches because these are some serious issues. And if we're going to talk about deepfakes, we got to talk about them. And the first one is involuntary.
Before we move on, do you want to? Tammy has a question here.
Sure.
She's wondering, how is a video available in multiple languages different than from having a video dubbed into other languages as done in the past?
So it's a matter of perspective. So, what you could possibly say is that to dub that, you would have to have someone who has the skill to speak in a language, and there's some sort of human effort involved. And so, there is a bit there. The other problem with it is if it goes on with AI and nobody involved speaks the language that it's going out into, there's nobody there to do quality check. And so you're just trusting that the system is going to be perfect. And oftentimes with language, context and nuance is very important. And so that can be where something can fall down and where there still is kind of a leg up for humans on the ground. Now, that may become less of a concern as AI gets more sophisticated, but that depends. And it's less about dubbing, because oftentimes when we talk about AI or when we talk about deepfakes in this space, it's not just dubbing over the original speaker, which was the case in the BJP party video. It was oftentimes in the corporate training, it's putting them in the avatar of someone who looks like they are from the host country. So you are creating a digital body for this digital voice to live in. And so it's more complicated kind of from that end. Any other questions right now?
No, thank you.
All right, yeah. So, all right, so now we're going to jump into our kind of the darker side of deepfakes. So the single most problematic use that deepfakes are put to are in the area of involuntary pornography. Sometimes you hear this called deepfake porn or fake pornography, but while the terms may change, the problem stays the same. That initial subreddit devoted to deepfakes that I mentioned in the history section was specifically targeting involuntary pornography. Starting in 2017, they would focus on substituting the likeness of a female celebrity onto the bodies of other pornographic actresses. By some estimates, this is still the primary use of true deepfake videos that are made in the world today, and they've received approximately 135 million views from around the world in the last 4 years. And this is not an equal opportunity negative. Women are 100% of the targets. The victims are mostly high-profile women in the entertainment industry from the United States, South Korea, the United Kingdom, Canada, and India. There's been some success in having some websites that host this material shut down, but as with many things on the widely unregulated internet, once something is produced, it is difficult to have it removed entirely. Further, there are still websites entirely devoted to this type of pornography. It goes without saying that this is a huge issue. As deepfake technology becomes more widespread and easier to use, the potential for this to spin out of control is not hard to imagine. but we don't even have to imagine it because someone has already gone to the trouble of making deepfake involuntary pornography easy to use. DeepNude is a program for Windows and Linux. It is AI trained on pictures of women that in 30 seconds could create an image of an unclothed woman based on a picture of a clothed woman. The algorithm is a GAN, or a generative adversarial network, which we'll discuss in the next section, trained on the Pix2Pix dataset of over 10,000 images. The program worked with various degrees of success, but was generally highly successful on high-resolution, well-lit images that directly faced the camera. While the program placed large watermarks on the images, this could be removed by paying $50 for the full program. The full program would put a large fake sticker in the top left corner that was easily cropped out using other commercially available photo software. The creator of this software, referred to in a Vice article by Samantha Cole as Alberto, says that he created this as a technological exercise and to see what could happen. Alberto also pointed out that there is little that the algorithm could do that someone moderately trained on Photoshop techniques could not also do given a few hours. Further, Alberto pointed out that he was not in control of how people used the software and that the tool itself was neutral and what people did with it was up to them. This all obviously leaves the landscape ripe for abuse. In a bad turn of the Streisand effect, where by bringing attention to something that you want shut down, you make it even more popular, after Cole's article, DeepNude's popularity briefly soared before it was taken offline by the creator to prevent further abuse. But after it was taken offline, it wasn't permanently mothballed. Instead, the semi-anonymous creator sold the software to an anonymous buyer for $300,000. Most of this took place between 2018 and 2019. And this is just one example of the use of deepfakes in the pornography arena, but it's especially interesting because of its ability to place this technology in the hands of novice users. And this field has only expanded quite a bit in the last 18 months. The next negative use of deepfakes that I want to talk about is financial fraud. According to an August 2019 report in the Wall Street Journal, a criminal used a deepfake software program to impersonate an executive's voice. The CEO of a UK energy company thought he was speaking to the CEO of its German parent company, who asked him to send funds to a Hungarian supplier. The request was said to be urgent and needed to occur within the hour. The equivalent of $243,000 was transferred. This was the first fraud claim fulfilled by insurer Euler Hermes to involve AI, but it is certainly not the last that is expected. As deepfakes and AI become more broadly sophisticated, they will naturally be able to mimic the cadence and routine behavior of people. If you have a Gmail account, you've probably seen some of this firsthand with the predictive text that it turns on. It knows how you start and sign off emails and what punctuation you're inclined towards using, and the more you use the software, the more it learns about you. Right now, it's estimated that it would take hours of audio to stitch together a voice like the one used in the energy company attack. But in the grand scheme of things, a few hours of talking is not that hard to put together. This one webinar that I'm doing right now will give you about a 45-minute sample of my voice, and people can be recorded without their consent in a variety of locations around the country. As technology becomes more sophisticated, it will in all likelihood take a lower amount of input as well as less time to create an equally effective facsimile. Companies are already entering the financial sector to stop deepfake-based fraud. Mitek is a company adding biometric authentication checks to companies like Chase, Amro, MasterCard, and more, but it may not be institutions that are the most at risk. Individuals may actually be more inclined to fall for phishing scams if the request for information and money comes from voices that sound like relatives or other trusted associates. Deepfakes on social medias of business leaders could be used to manipulate markets. The potential financial fallout of the misuse of deepfakes is large, and we're just now in the beginning stages of seeing how both crime and crime prevention will develop in this area. The next area of concern is that of bad faith discussions, especially when deepfake and cheapfake technology is used. This happens when items are produced and shared with an audience, but they're only identified as a satire when the publishers are caught and forced to identify them as such. A prime example of this was a 2018 fake interview between Ali Beth Stuckey of Blaze TV and United States Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The video isn't a deep fake, but rather uses deceptive editing practices to make it appear that the representative is stumped by the questions of the reporter. The video was posted and received over 1 million views before a New York Times reporter pointed out that it had no disclaimer, at which point the network added one. Stuckey claimed on Twitter that the point was for the exchange to look edited and that it was clearly always intended as satire. Whether or not Stuckey's claim is true is ultimately unknowable. What this does bring to light, though, is the issue of deepfakes being used in bad faith manners. There is nothing stopping anyone from publishing a piece of malicious content that is intended to deceive and then, once found out, claiming that it is merely satire and that those who are opposed to it are against artistic expression, don't get the joke, or are pro-censorship. These strawman arguments are ultimately not terribly convincing or useful in the ongoing discourse around the topic, but that's kind of the point. The producer wins on all cards. The content gets to stay up and people get to see it. The content will be shared by people out of context and without any additional material marking it as a hoax. And it will seem like there is an equal sides controversy, so people will be able to pick the side that makes themselves feel better and present their viewpoint in a more favorable light, leaning us all further into confirmation bias. Misleading clips like this have proliferated over the last decade, and they will only become more convincing as deepfake technology becomes more common. As we've seen repeatedly, bad actors will continue to use whatever technology is at their disposal to manipulate the information landscape, and they will use satire as a shield to defend their bad actions. Closely tied to the idea of bad faith discussions is the idea of political misinformation being disseminated by deepfake technology. While political information is one of the primary ways that misinformation and disinformation are spread, deepfakes are actually not currently involved in this that much. To quote from an October 2020 NPR article, you can think of deepfakes as the bazooka and video splicing as a slingshot. And it turns out the slingshot works. It's a quote from Hani Farid, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, specializing in visual and misinformation. Thus, at present, it doesn't appear that the cost of using deepfake tech to spread political disinformation the cost is too high for the rewards. However, this may not always be the case, and thinking about these potential issues now is a good way of preparing about them as the misinformation landscape continues to evolve. This is also a good reminder that different technologies involved in misinformation landscape will be employed in differing ways. Whereas the concept of fake news and social media has been dominated by the political and healthcare fields, deepfakes are primarily tied to personal rather than societal ends in most cases. This may change in the future, but this is actually an area of misinformation where the fear is much greater than the present reality. And I was personally shocked that this was not more of an issue in the 2020 political campaigns in the United States, but we actually kind of lucked out on that one. The power of synthetic media can have is not technical. It is contextual, and it has been used to silence women opposed to those in power. And so I want to tell the story of these two women. The woman on the left is Senator Leila de Lima of the Philippines. She's an outspoken opponent of the Duterte government's drug war, and in 2017, she was arrested for allegedly being involved in the drug trade during her time as Justice Secretary. In the midst of this, a deceptively edited video was released and shared widely on social media that made it appear that she was protecting drug kingpins that were under arrest. The video contributed to turning public opinion against her, and though the video is not solely responsible, De Lima remains in prison today. Another example is in 2018, journalist Reina Ayub, who's pictured on the right, reported on an 8-year-old Kashmiri girl who had been raped and the outrage across the country. The nationalist BJP was marching in support of the accused, and she spoke on BBC and Al Jazeera about the issues with protecting child sex abusers. The next day, she awoke to a flurry of faked tweets that appeared to come from her account, saying she hated India and loved Pakistan, being shared all over social media. And then a contact center a video that was being shared by insiders in the BJP that was a faked pornographic video, ostensibly of Ayub. Abuse on all social media platforms spread quickly, and the video was shared widely. The police did nothing, and the UN ultimately had to intervene. Ayub said in a later interview that the experience had a major negative impact on her health, and it continued as of the 2018 of the interview that I read to follow her career. These are just two examples, but they ultimately point to one of the most potentially disturbing trends in the dark side of deepfakes: using synthetic media of all types to silence critique and to harm individuals in the minority. Of course, this is disgusting. It goes without saying, but there is little to stop further hate campaigns moving in this direction as these tools become more widespread and simpler to use. There are two major cases related to deepfakes in a political context, though, that point to potential uses of this technology in the future. The first was part of an attempted coup in Gabon. In late 2018, Gabonese President Ali Bongo had been missing from public life for several months. Rumors were circulating throughout the country that the 59-year-old was no longer healthy enough to be president, and he was being hidden by the government. A New Year's Day address was released on television. There's a screenshot from it on the screen. After this address was released, the internet exploded with suspicions that Bongo appeared stiff, stilted, and had unnatural movements, and that the eyes seemed a bit odd in the video. Bongo's political opponents declared the video a deepfake and claimed the president was incapacitated or dead. The rumors spread quickly on social media. This caused a rapid destabilization of the political environment in Gabon and an attempted coup by the military, the first in over 50 years. The coup failed, and Bongo has since returned to public life. Was the video a deepfake? No one knows. Some think Bongo had a major stroke, which caused the issues with his appearance in the recorded address. Others still maintain it was a deepfake. But whether the video was real is almost beside the point. The larger lesson is that the emergence of deepfakes will make it increasingly difficult for the public to distinguish between what is real and what is fake, and a situation that political actors will inevitably exploit with potentially devastating consequences. After all, in this case, a video that was believed to be a deepfake sparked a military coup. The second high-profile use of deepfakes in a political context was in June of 2019. A video surfaced on social media purporting to be Malaysian Minister of Economic Affairs Azman Ali and a male aide engaged in a sexual act. Same-sex sexual activity is illegal in Malaysia, and it has been previously used as an excuse for jailing politicians. In a reverse of the example from Gabon, though, this time it was the government calling the video a deepfake. The file was analyzed by independent experts, but they were unable to confirm that it was fake. Regardless, Ali remains a member of the Malaysian government as of the end of 2020. So what did these two examples of the political power of deepfakes teach us? Well, first, each of these examples lacked a clear author of the video file. Instead, they were put together and then disseminated to the public. Second, in each, the government took a side, declaring it to be real or fake, but outside authorities were unable to conclusively back these claims. Thus, it creates an environment where which side you believe matters more than the actual evidence itself. This is not a new approach to misinformation, but rather a sophisticated amplification of issues that are already present in the info landscape. Spread of ideas on social media is only growing as more people in the world become connected to the internet, and the issues of deepfakes are going to be ongoing. It's an international problem with global implication. So now let's talk about how they're made.
We have a question here
Yeah.
about that. Zach says the uncertainty that continues to surround the video of the Gabonese president is astonishing. Is there really no digital fingerprint that can be detected by computer scientists in order to determine the authenticity of a video?
Not that I've been able to see from any of the reports that I've read. So a lot of people have really looked into this, and I went checking after that, but not that I was able to find in any of my research. And I don't have enough sophistication as a video forensic person to know that myself. So yeah, I mean, it's concerning. And it's often because they get shared so quickly that it's hard to identify where the original video came from. So it's copies of copies of copies, which often hides the source of a lot of these things.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the most accessible forms of deepfakes is from the website thispersondoesnotexist.com. Every time this website is loaded, it produces a new headshot of a person who, you guessed it, does not exist. Users can refresh the page as many times as they want without ever getting a copy. This is because the images aren't coming from a stacked database of images. Instead, they are being created in real time by a generative adversarial network, which is called a GAN. While creation of images is simple now, creation of video and audio is coming next and could prove to be equally sophisticated. So let's jump in. What is a GAN and how does it work? They're only as good as their data sets. So you're going to notice that most of these synthetic fakes are of white people, which are typically overrepresented in AI training databases. A GAN is made up of two artificial neural networks. Neural networks are any computing systems that have been put together to constitute the function of a brain, typically with a goal of mimicking the human brain. GANs are actually not that old, and they predate their first use in deepfakes by only a few years. GANs were invented by Ian Goodfellow in 2014 during his PhD studies, And in 2016, Yann LeCun called GANs the most interesting idea in the last 10 years of machine learning. So what makes them so exciting? Well, prior to GANs, neural networks were pretty good at classifying existing content. They could decode speech, recognize faces, tell you if something was bred or not bred. But they weren't especially good at creating new things. So this is the advancement that GANs provided, the ability not only to perceive, but to create. That's where the generative part comes from. The architecture of a GAN is two separate neural networks, a generator and a discriminator pitted against one another. The generator is given a sample data set of what is desired to be produced. In the case of this person does not exist, GAN we just looked at, it would be human faces. The generator starts to create new images that are, in terms of their pixels, mathematically similar to the existing data set. The discriminator, on the other hand, has no data set. Its only job is to perceive things that are either synthetic or not once they're passed on. They exist and work adversarially, the A in GAN. The generator tries to pass synthetics by the discriminator, while the discriminator tries to sniff out the fakes. A common metaphor used to describe this work is typically that of an art forger and a detective tracking down fakes. The generative side wins, and thus a GAN is successful when the discriminator's success rate falls below 50%, which is the guessing rate. The machine learning community has an open source ethos, so everything from Goodfellow's original paper to most research advances in generative modeling are generally made available for anyone to download and make use of. Thus, this toolset becomes available to a variety of actors seeking a variety of ends. As I previously said, a deepfake is any synthetic media developed by AI. More specifically, deepfakes are reliant on deep learning, a subset of AI which seeks to make the computation of a multi-layer network feasible. In fact, the deep in deepfake comes from deep learning. This diagram shows the relationship between AI, machine learning, and deep learning, as it is important to remember that AI is a broad field of study, and deep learning is only a small piece of that, with deepfakes being only one use of deep learning. Another common method of deepfake production is the use of variational autoencoders. This places two GANs in partnership rather than an adversarial network, but they have to be trained on a much larger data set than GANs, so they're a lot more uncommon. No matter the method that's used, though, the goal of a deepfake is to produce a perfect deepfake. A perfect deepfake is one that is unable to be detected by both human beings and algorithms. Ostensibly, it's 100% fake objective reality. At present, perfect deepfakes don't exist. Deepfakes are usually found out by comparing multiple frames of a video against one another, and because deepfakes don't produce videos as a single file. Rather, it deals with each frame as a separate image, then simulates the movement when combined at 24, 36 frames per second, whatever. However, when the frames have artifacts that don't belong from frame to frame, deepfakes can be found out. This is one of those areas that's an ongoing game of cat and mouse. In 2019, one of the easiest ways to tell if something was a deepfake was to watch the eyes of a person in the video. This was often the area where errors would occur and that was easy to catch on to. However, once the error was noticed, developers fixed the problem. So the eyes are actually not a great way to figure out a deepfake anymore. Currently, it's widely assumed that a perfect deepfake is impossible given current capabilities. But the technology's improved rapidly and it's nearing the point of success. When this happens, it'll have several milestones still to hit, a perfect deepfake in a lab with human analysis, then with algorithmic analysis, then a perfect deepfake created out in the wild. But the search for the perfect deepfake, much like the search for the perfect burrito, is mostly of academic interest. As we have seen from the examples in Gabon and Malaysia that we discussed earlier, a deepfake doesn't even have to be even good to have a profound impact on the world. So if you're not after the perfect deepfake, then what can the technology do for you? Well, as we talked about earlier, synthetic media and things that fall under the spectrum can do a lot. The type you've probably encountered most often is called face swapping. Common on social media, face swapping is when a face of a person is inserted into a video. The technique seeks to flawlessly place someone in a place or situation that they've never been in before. But face swaps have some issues. These apps have proliferated in an environment where privacy is not always at the top of people's minds. Many times these apps are developed overseas and they don't have strong privacy protections. And so, they're often coming out of China, Russia, and other countries without strong privacy controls. And so it's something that we want to be careful about. Another issue with AI in general is that the data sets that most of them are trained on is they focus on people. They're disproportionately white and male. Thus, the effective use of this software by BIPOC and non-male users may be limited. I pulled the example from Guardians of Galaxies intentionally. While Reface does the face in the GIF that it creates, it does not redo the hair or the skin tone in the hands. Thus, the software has limitations based on its applications that propagates existing power structures. While some work has been done to address these concerns in the last decade, there's still a long way to go until any sort of equity is achieved. Another method commonly in use is that of lip syncing. The Barack Obama Jordan Peele deepfake that the BBC put together is probably used that as their main method of faking things. They used audio and performance from Peele to create the audio for the video and then manipulated the video of Obama to make it look like that's what he was actually saying. With lip syncs, the issue comes in with the amount of effort involved. Lip syncs are only as good as the performers doing the portraying. Peele's a good Obama impersonator, but there are moments when you can clearly tell it's not the former president's voice. Then there's the issue with even getting a performer in the first place. So while lip syncs are well understood and comparatively easy to accomplish, they may proliferate among more coordinated groups, and they're not the simplest to put together for individual actors. The last non-perfect strategy I wanted to introduce is facial reenactment. Facial reenactment is transferring facial expressions from one person to another person in a video. By doing this, a creator can make someone look surprised, angry, or any other emotion. Typically, this involves a source and a target, and the Stanford Face-to-Face project was heavily involved in this in the mid-2010s. Some applications of the software can even create the transfer in real time during live produced videos. There are other strategies out there, but the strategy used depends not only on the goal, but what you're trying to accomplish. New software in the synthetic media environment is developed with increasing frequency. This is one that's widely available called Fake App. If you saw the memes last year of inserting Nicolas Cage into different movies, you've seen Fake App at work. And it's pretty much the standard, and the makers of the software allow people to download it free of charge and encourage them to use it with good intentions. But what you do with it is your business as far as they're concerned. What can be said about the software is that while it's freely available, that doesn't mean it's as simple as pushing a button to use. It requires image and video manipulation knowledge to use effectively, and it's not nearly as simple as the phone apps built for a direct purpose might make it seem. So we have, now that deepfakes are becoming more and more common, we're starting to see them all over the world. So we want to have deepfake detectors. They assess lighting, shadow, facial movements, and other features to flag things as fabricated. They can also add filters to images to make it harder to use them for deepfake purposes. And the tech is still in its early stages, but there are a few options out there that have developed in this area, such as TruePic and Deep Trance. And also DARPA with the Department of Defense has a media forensics program that's working on this problem. So what are detectors looking for these days? Well, they can oftentimes the resolution will shift between frames. That can be a giveaway. Neural nets and detection AI can detect these issues across multiple frames, alerting users to problems. They can also see audio that can actually be easier to detect because detector AI can look for audio in the video that is a sound a human being can't make. That often gives videos away. While the pursuit of this is certainly noble, they're far outclassed by the number of people working on creating better deepfakes. And as I said, when talking about the perfect deepfake, each detector development just gives those in the deepfake producer field more information about what to fix next time. So let's get into the disinformation ecosystem. Now that we have a handle, I know we're running short on time, so we're gonna kind of fly through this. So you all know that we are in this disinformation ecosystem that is rough. That is much more common on the extreme ends of the political debate. And this stuff moves in packs. Anti-vax feeds anti-science, which feeds flat earth, which feeds QAnon. And it's social media and images and fake news sites and deepfake videos and all of these things. But when it comes to deepfake videos, something that we need to remember is that as a relatively new development, especially in the United States, is that much of this disinformation is spreading within communities without seeking to spread it to the broader internet. Whether these are on platforms that are more common in various communities geographically, like WeChat in China or WhatsApp in India, or philosophically cordoned off places like Parler or Gab, it makes a situation where global moderation is impossible and no one service or country can control the problem. And so deepfakes come in because they create doubt about traditional forms of media that were traditionally trusted. We used to believe that pictures and video were full of truth, and that becomes more doubted all the time. Deepfakes allow those that agree with the point of a deepfake to encourage a bad faith debate by just pretending to pose a question or to put something forward as satire. And so we're in a world where no sources can be innately trusted, no format is necessarily truthful, and the integrity of debate is undermined by those who turn everything into a joke or question. The concept of truth dies by 1,000 cuts. And so in some sense, we've entered this postmodernist truth hellscape where all realities are equally real and truth has no meaning outside of people's lived experience and what they feel to be accurate. But the apocalypse isn't here yet. Most of the faked videos of political import in 2020 were cheap fakes or videos that were edited using a more standard suite of editing products. While I anticipate that there will be more of these in the future, this isn't something that's actually causing bad purposes, at least on the political level in the United States at the current time. So why should the library care? We are in a field that's deeply involved in deepfake tech or synthetic media production. Well, here's a couple of reasons. Authority and information decay. If a deepfakes proliferate, then authority and information continue to decay. And there have been repeated instances of politicians claiming unflattering videos were deepfakes, and proving those claims correct has been impossible. Further, deepfakes, can contribute to library reputational harm. We're a commonly believed source of authority. Can we separate reality from fiction? And how do we deal with that as our brand, as what is out there in the world becomes harder and harder to delineate between truth and what's false? Also, information literacy is becoming more complex. We're all trying to teach our students to be, and our customers and our staffs to be better media consumers. But that's becoming more complicated all the time as these tools, which are so sophisticated and so advanced, come out, and we have limited time to teach information literacy already. Well, and to learn ourselves. Adjudicating a deepfake takes more time and mental resources than applying the crap test or thinking about an article. And some of the tools we're going to need don't even exist yet. So our current information literacy tools are just not up to the challenge of widespread synthetic media, and it's going to present an issue to tomorrow's students and critical thinkers. And there's a lack of obvious legal solutions. We won't go into all of the direct things, but basically, when you think about the legal landscape, the internet is international and laws are local, whether to a country or a place. And so you can't regulate an international problem without an international governing body, and there's not one. So as much as we might try to regulate deepfakes on our level, there just isn't much that we can do that's going to block that. So there are things that we can do. Some businesses have taken a stand where they've banned deepfakes on their platforms. And a lot of people have been advocating towards different businesses to have them to take a stance on deepfakes and to advocate for real rule changes. In my opinion, this is the best avenue for short-term systemic reform. If you use a thing, email them, shoot them on Twitter, tell them that you want better deepfake policies. In my opinion, all social media platforms should have a strong position on synthetic media and clearly defined rules as to what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And we can all stay educated. Vice is actually a really great news source for this. Samantha Cole, like I mentioned before, does a lot of good reporting. You can set up a Google News report around fake news. You can search for deepfake and report to get publications from interest groups and academic institutions. There's a lot of great work coming around, but there aren't a lot of established experts talking about this stuff because we've only been here for 4 years. So there hasn't been a lot of time to get established. And so you can read widely to kind of see what's going on and to stay on top of everything that's happening in this space. I would encourage you to include synthetic media in your own information education sessions. Talk about it with students of all ages and provide examples. Focus your class to the level of the audience you're talking to, and try to focus on countermeasures like seeking outside confirmation of claims in a video. And the last thing that I want to leave you with as far as this goes is to resist fatalism. There is no solution, but that does not mean that there's nothing to do. So we want to keep fighting the good fight. People who are on the technology side of this say that no technology is safe from misuse and everything can be used in a negative way. But does it mean that technology should not be developed? My point is that all technology should serve the world development and be used in good faith. Well, we know they're not going to be. So deepfake production and development is going to continue. So it's up to the people with concerns to express them and to seek solutions now and to be part of the conversation that we're going to have as we are moving through all of this. So I think that this brings up a lot of lingering questions for the library world. And I think that it's something that we need to keep talking about within our spaces so that we are prepared as we move forward into the world. So I do apologize for running a little long and having to truncate some of the end of that, but I am available for questions, and please feel free to reach out to me by email or through my website if you have questions or want to continue this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mac. We appreciate this. Lot to digest and think about. So we are at the end of our time. If anyone has a quick question, you could drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be sending out the recording along with an evaluation soon to everyone who attended. So thank you so much for coming. Lots of thank yous in the chat here for you, Mac. Lots of information. Postmodern truth hellscape, I think, is a interesting phrase that will stay with me. All right, thanks everyone. We'll be in touch. Thank you, Mac.
Bye, y'all.